I could go on a tirade about making guarantees and promises as an athlete. However, let's understand, Jimmy Johnson once said it well, I believe, when he said, I treat everyone fairly, but I don't treat them the same. Meaning certain guys have certain equity that they can bring to the table. And if you can deliver, you can deliver. Now, if Austin Saravalde would have said, I guarantee or I promise that we're going to beat Michigan this year, maybe that would carry just a little bit less weight, and maybe that's something that he shouldn't do. But coming from the best player in college football, I still am going to go through my little warning after you guys comment on this about that's not the smartest thing to do, but the guy's 19 years old. It's not the end of the world. It's not a big deal. And I think regardless of the outcome of that game at the end of this season, he's still ticketed toward multi-millions of dollars in the NFL. So it's not going to hurt him, but I do have my thoughts about players guaranteeing games, Tony.
What did he say?
He said something like, we're going to I promise a win against Michigan. I will look it up to make sure that we're accurate.
You know, when before the season, and like, I don't really get worked up about it. I guess it just depends on what they say. And I know he said something, but I don't really have any strong thoughts on it, because players right now have to say so many different things. Like, they're, especially in the era of the NIL, where they're out there a lot more and people want them to talk more. And so certainly you're going to make promises like the Tim Tebow thing. You're never going to see anybody play harder than we will, that sort of thing. And I also don't know that like promising wins is a huge thing, except for the week leading up to the game. I think for me, that's when it starts to matter. Stuff said in August and July or whatever doesn't really do much for me, unless it's derogatory towards the opponent rather than positive towards yourself.
Yeah, I don't look at it as a negative or a positive. I think as it'll probably be forgotten by the time it comes around that week. Although, people do have long memories, I suppose. But it will be interesting. The byplay going back and forth between now and then, and keep predicting a victory. Ohio State is eventually going to break through against Michigan, and so one of these years you will get it right if you keep predicting a victory or promising a victory. But I'd rather that than excuses for why they lose and gosh, we're trying and all these other things. Don't tell me about trying hard. Show me the baby. Let's get it done.
I am seeing under a headline from CBS Sports, I'm not finding the exact quote, but Smith previously vowed never to lose to the Wolverines again after the 2024 defeat. So he had made that statement previously. What he said this week was about, I hate them. I don't want to quote that exactly. He said, yes, I hate them. Smith said, where did I learn that? High school recruiting. First came in, I made a mistake. I was wearing dark blue. Coach Bryant Hartline and Coach Keenan Bailey were like, you can't wear them colors here. And from that day forward, I was like, okay, it's real. And then he later states, I'm not a sore loser, but I hate losing. And losing to that team up north was pretty crazy. In the end, I think it really helped us play the way we did in the playoffs, but I didn't want to go to Ohio State and lose to the team up north. I just hate them, just something about them.
I can attest from my own personal experience that Keenan Bailey is very much a stickler on this. Like this was before he was even a full-time assistant. It was just a quality control dude. The guys who are not full-time assistant coaches have to dress and shower in a different area, and they have to cross through the media work area in the atrium there at the Woody Hayes Center to get to that area. And if you're sitting in that area and you're wearing a blue shirt, as I was one day a few years ago, Keenan will come in and say, hey, man, you're wearing blue. That's not allowed here, and we're like, hey, man, I don't work for Ohio State. So, there you go. But it is what it is.
The alternative is a player saying, I don't mind losing to those guys. And of course, that's not the case. But absolutely, that loss sent them on the run that they had. And you can ask yourself, would they have done this without, would they have won a national championship without the loss to Michigan? I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to change it. I don't think let's go ahead and take the national championship off the table, get a win against Michigan and see how things go, because they certainly propelled them and it brought them together. And talking to the players at the NFL Combine after they left, they all said, like, you asked them what was the key moment of the season, and they said losing to Michigan, because that was the galvanizing aspect of the season and drove them forward. And yeah, I don't have any issues until you start talking negatively about the opponent, or the week of, when you start saying stuff that maybe you shouldn't.
I always thought they were the best team last year. That's why I picked them to win the national championship. Now, did I have the confidence that they were the 85 Bears and that much better than everyone else? No, I'm not saying that I had that kind of confidence that they were, but they certainly did separate themselves in those 4 games versus everybody else. There's no question about that. They were the superior team by far in college football last year during the playoff, and good enough to get into the playoff, and then you're 0-0. Here's my little rant on guaranteeing games. Post Joe Namath, who obviously made this a thing way back when, Super Bowl III, I'll put it this way. If I was an NFL head coach, and now I'll extend this to college football since these guys are making money as well, I would tell my team, you guys make all the guarantees you want. You make all the guarantees, but you have basically banked this game for us. You have guaranteed this game. Therefore, if we lose this game, you give up your paycheck. Your game check is forfeited because you have guaranteed the game. Therefore, that needs to be backed up. Therefore, you lose the game check if you lose the game because you've guaranteed the game. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut. Just go out and play and win the game. And let everyone know that you were the better team when we played the game. I just think it's silly, this promising, guaranteeing games. But again, we're talking about the best player in the country. And, is it the end of the world? No, I'm not claiming that either. I don't think it's a smart thing to do, but I don't think it's like some egregiously stupid thing to do. It's fine. It's not going to affect him. That's for sure.
One of the issues is, like, you make that statement and then you lose, and the player's like, well, I did my part. I did enough. I did enough to win. I don't know what everybody else's problem was. And then you can create some issues in the locker room that way.
Kevin Noon, of course, stopping by Big Me Podcast, and of course, BuckeyeHuddle.com for his work. Kevin, we're talking about Jeremiah Smith. Of course, he kind of doubled up or doubled down on his previous statements about promising to never lose to Michigan. And then this week it was a rant about hating Michigan, which I'm sure every Buckeye fan is going to love, because the venom cannot be deep enough for these fans. And so they want that anti-John Cooper type rhetoric about Michigan. And so they love that. But in terms of a promise, I went on my little rant that players should not guarantee games.
No, but it sure gives us something to talk about when they do. So, I love the passion. I love the bulletin board material, whatever. People are like, say nothing, have no personality. That's boring. That's boring. There's not much that you can write about with that. So let's have a little fun. Let's talk a little, and get out there. Now, if Jeremiah could go out there and by all accounts and have a great game, and the final outcome may not come the way that everybody who's in here would like to see it go. But, I think that if it keeps Jeremiah that much more focused and that much more driven, and, keeps people from getting on his shoulder and tell him how great he is and how he, is bigger than all this and needs to, test NFL waters early, let him, he can hate the Easter Bunny. I don't care.
The Easter Bunny.
That's the best I could come up with. I'm sorry. I was just doing an interview in Austin, Texas. That's why I'm late. So I don't know what I'm thinking about right now.
At first glance, I would kind of question the true hatred that somebody from Miami, Florida could have, having played one game against Michigan. However, he's the one there every day, bonding with his teammates, that's got scarlet and gray on, that's lifting weights, that's watching film, that's doing all the things, being a Buckeye 24/7, 365, that is certainly caught up with my 50 years of being a Buckeyes fan. So when put into that context, I have no issue with it. And if he says he hates them, God bless him.
It's one of the things I tell people all the time. The players hurt more after a loss to Michigan than the fans do. They've put it all in there, and they're actually on the field doing it, and it's happening to them. You're just watching it, and not that you don't feel it or whatever, but they're in there. And so, yeah, the losses to Michigan hurt the fans, but then the players leave and they don't have their gold pants, and they're not going to get any, and that's something that stays with them forever. And so, yeah, people can move on. The fans can move on from a loss. When you win a national championship, you move on. And yes, so do the players, but they don't have what other players have had since the losing streak has begun.
I hate it when you're not getting any.